Recruiting dominoes continue to fall as this 2025 football season fast approaches. This is Louisiana versus All Y'all's Recruit That Boot. He's Sam Spiegelman. I'm Jared Roser, and we'll get into some of the latest updates from Louisiana's 2026 class, as well as some more focus coming into play for the 2027 class, at least some early reads on top prospects and where they might be leaning heading into what will be their junior seasons. Sam, it's now mid-August. We're getting real tight on Spiegelman baby watch. We're getting real tight on some of these preseason scrimmages and whatnot around the corner. Weekly stress check. How are we doing over there in the Spiegelman home as you kind of navigate everything on your plate?
A lot of waiting, a lot of impatience, a lot of pacing. I've also double checked to make sure there's still flights available to New Orleans in December for state championships, make sure those are still set, hotel reservations locked in. But besides that, those are, just kind of killing time, man. These recruiting dominoes are a great distraction. But super excited to have a little one who I can share this intel with, get his feedback, and have him give no, complaining, bite back, not telling me I'm wrong, just someone to support me. And I'm looking forward to that.
I like that we have this on tape now so that when we, we're however many years down the line and you do start getting some feedback from the next generation of Spiegelmans of like, Dad, I don't know about that get off on that kid. I don't know how long we're going to be waiting for that. If that's like age 8, age 12, certainly by the time you have a teenager, there's going to be some differing opinions in the household, but I'm glad we have this to look back on whenever we do get to that point. Let's get into some of these new commitments, though. We mentioned the dominoes that are falling extremely quickly. The vast majority of Louisiana's top seniors are now committed to colleges, and a couple of the most recents that we'll talk about specifically, Cole Bergeron, the STM quarterback, who we've talked about a bunch on this show, as arguably the top quarterback in Louisiana's senior class, did indeed commit to Virginia Tech last week, as we anticipated, just based on some of the relationship there, the timeline and whatnot. Let's talk about Cole and a big quarterback domino coming off of Louisiana's 2026 board and what the Hokies get in that young man as he prepares for his second year as starter.
Yeah, we spoke about this last week, but, you and I both saw him as an underclassman, and I think that the arrow has continued to point up for Bergeron leading into his senior year. This is as excited as I've been about Cole at any point in his development. I think that when you compare him to some of the best quarterbacks around the country, he certainly is a tier below in the fact that he is a pocket passer. He doesn't have elite athleticism to break the pocket and sort of improvise, but he is an assassin within the confines of his skill set. He is extremely accurate. The most important trait when it comes to evaluating quarterback, he throws with great anticipation. He's super calm and composed, and he's a fantastic game manager with upside, I believe. I think what he's done this entire, 8 months of an offseason, various camp settings, the Elite 11 regional, different 7-on-7 settings, and then what he did for Pat Shermer out in Boulder, what he did for Coach Pry and Coach Montgomery out in Blacksburg this summer. I think he has the attention, and what he did even in Friday Night Lights in Baton Rouge. I think he has the attention of some of the best offensive coordinators in the country, and that's for a reason. What he lacks in overall athleticism, he certainly makes up for with his accuracy, his timing, his anticipation, and his ability to run a really high potency offense, which we're going to see this year for STM.
And he can move around enough. Obviously, I mean, not every quarterback's going to go out there and run a 4.40 and be gashing up opposing defenses for huge plays with their legs. But you want to see some mobility around the pocket and just kind of buy you some time. And I think he's got some of that for sure. You mentioned it. We talked about it some last week. Thought he had a great offseason, and that in that setting against some of the competition that he saw, the Friday Night Lights performance was probably the most excited I've been excited watching Cole going back to when you mentioned him being an underclassman, but I thought he had a great day that day in that setting in front of those coaches. And it sounds like that has been the case in some of his other trips around, including that stop to Blacksburg. But this point now, the top tier of Louisiana senior quarterbacks all have commitments on the books. We didn't get a chance to talk about Jackson Fields a couple weeks ago, but he's committed to Incarnate Word. Luke Delfield last week announced his commitment to Northwestern State. And so those are three guys that we've had a chance to watch grow up an awful lot over these past few years. Luke was a starter as a freshman, Jackson as a sophomore, and was a district MVP and all of those things as a sophomore. And you kind of saw how critical he was to that Destrehan offense this past fall in his absence for a few weeks there, how it just wasn't quite the same. And then they got back humming when he got back into the lineup. But as you look at those three guys preparing for their senior years, all with title hopeful teams, and now knowing where they're planning to go for the next level, and any other thoughts on just Jackson, Luke, and Cole, and what you look forward to seeing from them this fall?
Yeah, we talked about it probably in June or at the end of the spring game season with Jackson and seeing what his future might hold. And, it's great for him to find a spot. I think he's someone who I don't think either one of us would be surprised if he had the senior season that he has kind of been itching for the last few years. Like you said, he's been dealing with injuries, been dealing with new offensive coordinators over the last few years. I think with the weapons that they have in Destrehan, with the offense now being in place and with him being at 100%, this could be a breakout year. So super excited to see what Destrehan looks like this year. And Luke Delafield, I he has been an eye catcher, I think, like you said, since he was a freshman, since they made it to the Superdome as an underclassman. Talking to his coaches, I believe this spring, or maybe it was after his junior season. They think the world of him over there in Stonewall. He is, if he brings a title, you already know that in December, I will anoint him the mayor of Stonewall. What I would love to see is I haven't been able to get a live eval of him in the last few years. To me, it's one of those situations where he shined as an underclassman and has kind of been at that same level now for several years. I would just love to get an update, hopefully this season, on the progress he's made behind center. And I certainly agree with you. This is a team with state title hopes. Would love to see him bring a title back to Stonewall and be anointed mayor in the process. That would be pretty tight.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I have really enjoyed getting to see a lot of Cole and a lot of Jackson the last few years. We obviously saw Luke as a freshman in that state championship game. And some of the moxie that he had and just willingness to, even when there was a young mistake against a really good Lutcher defense at times, he got right back out there and was not afraid to sling it downfield and handled that moment well, all things considered. The stage and the moment and the opponent and all of those factors. I haven't seen Luke in person, I don't believe, in about a year and a half. I saw him, at a bootleggers workout last winter, a year and a half ago. Would love to see him this senior season again and just kind of see where he's at. I know he's continued to have one hell of a high school career, and you see some of the highlights and numbers and those things, but obviously for quarterback in particular, getting a chance to see those guys in person is really critical. Another of the top notable commitments from this past week, Tamari Drake, a guy we talked about on this show at one point last season, I believe, when he started to kind of gain a little bit of notoriety on the recruiting trail. 6'1", 215 linebacker from Evangel Christian, an all-state linebacker for Evangel, put up a bunch of numbers in that, wild west of a District 1-5A. He was all over the field wrapping up tackles. He commits to Grambling this past week. And I know he had picked up kind of an early offer from Miami, and one of those situations of, hey, we'd love to come see you camp and whatnot. And then it seemed like some things had kind of stalled for him. I still think Grambling here gets a steal in Tamari Drake, who brings a lot to the table with the pop that he brings physically, and he can run. He's going to fly around the field and, close some windows in a hurry.
That's just the thing. When you, and this is a lesson for all the parents and coaches who wonder why sometimes it feels like you have a kid who's maybe playing above the college that they're ended up committed to or signing with. And that might be the case with Tamari Drake. I can remember being on rankings calls a year or two ago, and I was suspect to who this talent was. We ranked him pretty decently high as a high 3-star, but I put on the tape and I loved it as much as I love that mug that you're drinking of right now. But exactly that, when you don't camp, and coaches don't get the eyes on you, they're not going to take your commitment. And in this case, Mickey Joseph didn't hesitate to bring him on board at Grambling. I love the fit. I love him staying in state. I love Mickey Joseph doing his due diligence and recruiting locally. I think it's a nice lineup, and we'll see how he does going into this season.
Yeah, I know they're ecstatic to have him, and I think he's someone that is going to be a really nice get for the Tigers to bring down.
We can get Mickey on the phone right now if you want to get his thoughts on him. I mean, come on.
If he picks up, make sure you tell him out the gate, no cursing, no don't underscore the excitement with a couple expletives along the way. This is Recruit That Boot is obviously a family show. We have the pregnancy updates every week at this point in the game, and so we gotta keep it ready for the kiddos that are trying to keep up their recruiting boards around Louisiana. A couple of other notes in terms of commitments. George Loop, the receiver from Isidore Newman, committed to Dartmouth. I saw Kevin Martin, linebacker from Edna Carr, committed to Alcorn State. Jermaine Mitchell, JUCO product now, who is a former St. James star, committed this past week to Mississippi State. And so that was a really nice one for a guy that, not a current Louisiana high school guy, but someone that we really enjoyed watching just a year or so ago, and continue to raise his stock there at the JUCO route. Mentioned most of the seniors now around the state are pretty locked into where they're heading. Who are some of the top uncommitted prospects you're watching? Or I guess I'll kind of list you some of mine, and you can share if you have any feel for anything that may be on the immediate horizon with some of these guys to come off the board as well. Someone that we talked about when he moved into Louisiana, Jamaic Garrett, the linebacker now at Central Baton Rouge, a one-time Auburn commit, to me is the highest ranking remaining uncommitted guy. And obviously he's someone that came from out of state, was once committed to an SEC program. And so he's got, a lot of a stipulation to that whole remaining uncommitted part. He just, is kind of refocusing some things and reevaluating some things later in his process. But then running backs, Kieran Smith from Holy Cross, Alvin Celestine from Terrebonne, and I really love Antonio Gladney all over the field, athlete for Parkway in all three phases. Zaylon Young, the big hybrid tight end receiver from Neville High, and Greg Wolford, a guy that we've really enjoyed. We talk about watching a guy from early on and watching him grow up. The slot receiver from Destrehan, who's now over at Edna Carr for his senior year. Those are, some of the names that are highest in my rankings that are still looking for their college homes. Just as you look at who's still available out there, who of those guys stands out, and do you have any lean on any of those, for some fans that are wondering what's going to be the move for them?
Yeah, let's start at the top with Jamaic Garrett, who's now playing at Central High for his senior season, going to try to help the Wildcats repeat as 5A state champs. Again, one-time Auburn commit. Ole Miss has been the team setting the pace, but Ole Miss has since loaded up on a couple of fantastic linebackers and second-level defenders. I would say that Ole Miss might be trending down after kind of loading up this summer, and Jamaica still being uncommitted. LSU has been kicking the tires here. So is A&M. So is Vanderbilt. So is Georgia Tech. Miami and Colorado are two more teams that have been around with Jamaic Garrett, who all indications, no rush to make a decision after being committed to Auburn for really almost a full year. Now relocated in the boot. We'll see who takes a step forward. I think a lot of schools want to see what his senior season looks like. Could imagine that maybe 2 or 3 or 4 weeks into his senior season, he's making visits again and maybe restarting that recruiting process. You talked about Alvin Celestine. Texas State is a team that I've heard. You talked about Karen Smith from Holy Cross. I've heard Tulsa is a team picking up steam there. Beyond that, it's getting dry out there, Jarrett.
Yeah, I don't have all those guys I listed. I don't have a lot of read in terms of update. I didn't, other than Tulsa being kind of in touch with Smith, who coming off of last year's running back class and how overloaded it was in Louisiana. This year, you looked at those two guys who mentioned, Smith and Celestine, and then Jamarcier Plater up at Captain Shreve, who really burst onto the scene with a breakout junior season, then committed to Wake Forest earlier on this calendar year. I am a little bit surprised that Smith and Celestine still haven't found homes. I know they have had some good options, some good interest throughout. I thought maybe Tulane at some point may have come in stronger on one of them. Alvin's a little bit smaller than some of the colleges are looking at. I think that's something that, a lot of these guys in this class have run into. But when you watch what they do, you watch their toughness at their size, and then when they get a little space, how quickly they can be gone for 6. Brock Hayes is someone that's a fan of these guys, but obviously, there's a bigger recruiting class puzzle that comes into play when you talk about, who you're going to take, and particularly how you approach some of these in-state recruiting processes. Looking forward to seeing where all these guys do ultimately land, though. They're definitely Division I talents. Speaking of Division I talents and a guy that has offers continuing to come in after finding a home. We talked about Braden Allen, the commitment to Tulane a week or two ago that we last talked about Braden, and we mentioned that Ole Miss came in with an offer right after the Tulane commitment, and it has not slowed down for the Lafayette Christian receiver. Colorado and Oklahoma the most recent, and so the game is afoot. The chase is on to try and pry Braden away from Tulane after a great job by Coach Summerall, Coach Carter Sheridan, all those guys uptown to land that commitment. How much are you sweating some green and sky blue sweat there if you're a Tulane fan, worried about some of these bigger programs coming in, or do you feel secure about where they stand with Braden at the moment?
It's getting a little hot in here, Jarrett.
Oklahoma felt big.
Oklahoma, I think my colleague Steve Wilfong pointed out, speaking to Braden overnight, he's been to Oklahoma twice already. Last spring, he returned over the summer. He got an offer. He's expected back this fall. You can add now Norman to the list of destinations he'll be at, including Boulder, Colorado, Deion Sanders, Corey Phillips, who was on that LSU staff and was a huge part of recruiting Juwan Johnson out to Boulder back in the day, Pete Golding and Georgia McDonald over at Ole Miss, and of course that staff at Vanderbilt, who loves and prioritizes speed, is also trying to get a visit out to Nashville. You got 3 SEC teams and Coach Prime trying to rip him away from John Summerall and the Wave. I think, like you said, a credit to Coach Sheridan, Cole Hurd, the GM, and beating out Joey McGuire and those Red Raiders, and they have those very deep pockets over there in West Texas. But I think that they're going to have to do the biggest amount of legwork trying to keep Braden committed, because you have at least 4 schools working to get him on campus, and he's been open about taking those visits. So I'm going to keep him on the radar for sure.
When I look around the 2026 class in Louisiana, there aren't a ton of guys. I thought I may end up, as we look at potential flip candidates to monitor around the state, I thought I might end up with 5 or 6. And as I looked, Braden stood out because of obviously the surge of big programs. And then I don't think we're going to ever shut the door on Blaine Bradford and say just ignore it entirely. But Ohio State has been such a great fit for him. So you just kind of keep one eye open if you're LSU fans after some of the news we talked about a couple of weeks ago with Sam Petito, and just waiting to see when Blaine is on campus on a game day at some point this fall to watch big bro Jacob in some purple and gold, how that weekend goes. But there's not a lot beyond that to me that really kind of sets off the alarm bells. It seems like a lot of guys are really pretty heavily settled in. Is that kind of your feel for a lot of this class as well?
Yeah, I think with someone like Braden, who is now, amassing new offers, and is certainly has the door cracked open to take these visits, you could say that a flip's not imminent, but certainly some steam behind it, some very in the realm of possibility. With Blaine, we can talk about Jacob Bradford, his older brother, now being a freshman in Baton Rouge. We can talk about the addition of Sam Petito, who is the director of recruiting in Columbus and a big reason why Blaine committed in March. We could talk about the fact that Blaine, after committing, his father has told me, at least, that his recruitment has been shut down, and he did not take his other official visits to Baton Rouge or to Austin, and instead was in Columbus for the 5th time now in the past 14 months. With that being said, I have bugs in that building who say that Brian Kelly wants Blaine Bradford to be in this class. LSU has 7 of the top 8 players in Louisiana committed, and the one that they want right now is Blaine Bradford. They might have 3 safeties committed right now, but the focus is on Blaine Bradford. They have an official visit in their back pocket. They know that he will be on campus this fall because of his family ties. It is more of a wait and see than anything else. But we know that even if the barometer is very much favoring the Buckeyes, we know for a fact that LSU will not be taking its foot off the gas until December arrives.
Yeah, they'll continue to push. And the good news for LSU and LSU fans, as you mentioned, if Blaine does stick, as it has appeared will be the case with Ohio State, they've got a great defensive back group in tow for this 2026 class. Can always use a guy like Blaine Bradford in any room around the country, though, if it does fall that way. Nobody's telling Blaine no when it comes to signing.
You're talking about these star defenders playing critical roles in this new Blake Baker defense, and I couldn't think of a more perfect star defender than one Blaine Bradford at 6'2", 205 pounds, who plays like a speeding bullet and is as instinctual as any safety in the country. But that's just me, Jared. That's just my take.
Yeah, he's a monster. If we were doing like a Bruce Feldman freaks list of Louisiana, Blaine would be pretty high up on that list.
Right below Lamar.
Maybe something. Yep, a couple of the Baton Rouge guys might be something that we have a conversation more about on a future episode on a slow news week. But again, a lot of 2026 is come into pretty strong focus. 2027 continues to slowly ramp up, particularly the top tier of guys kind of figuring some things out. That class won't fully take center stage until during the course of this upcoming school year. Shoot, these kids go to school earlier and earlier every year now. They're in it now, this school year that we're now into the mix of. But 2 of these top quarterbacks in the 27 class, we talked more about Pop Houston a couple weeks ago. You have some new RPMs in there for Elijah Haven from Dunham, projecting him to Florida at the moment early on, and Malachi Ziegler, who I think we talked a little bit about last week. You have an SMU pick in for him. And so that's now all 3 of that top tier of quarterbacks in Louisiana's talented 2027 class. You have some early predictions in for. Talk me through these new picks that you made, Elijah and Malachi, and just what kind of led you to the Gators and the Mustangs for those 2.
Yeah, as we spoke about on the podcast, as we've reported on Rivals, as Malachi Ziegler out of Benton, as he told me about 2 weeks ago, he is moving closer to a decision, whether that is before his junior season, whether that is during his junior season. We had believed that SMU and Michigan were the 2 teams on top. Those are the 2 teams that made the biggest move with the Ziegler family this summer. Baylor and Mississippi State had been the 2 teams on top. And since Michigan has landed its 2027 quarterback, Peter Burke, out of Massachusetts, which has the folks on the hilltop screaming with jubilation about their chances with Malachi Ziegler. Rhett Lashley, Derek King over there have done phenomenal jobs with a slew of different quarterbacks over the years. They're great offensive-minded coaches. They're a fantastic coaching staff. And that Dallas, not too far from Benton, Louisiana, and they've been able to host him, I think 3 or 4 times this year, including for a camp session in June, which went really well. And he skyrocketed up their board because, much like Louisiana, there's a ton of really talented quarterbacks in the state of Texas for 2027. And SMU loves Ziegler, and the sense that I got is that it's mutual. And Malachi told me over the weekend he continues to move closer and closer to that finish line. I love where SMU is currently positioned with him. And then there's Elijah Haven, the Rivals industry ranking #1 quarterback, the only 5-star, I believe, in the class, and according to the industry rankings, out of the Dunham school. Listen, much like Malachi, Michigan was in his lead group. The other 2 schools are Florida, LSU, and Alabama. And I reported this in June. He's made 2 visits to Gainesville in as many summers. Billy Napier and Ryan O'Hare and Russ Callaway. Those are all guys that were at Louisiana a couple of years ago and have relationships. with. In fact, I think Malachi might have just dropped some news.
Did he really?
Those are relationships that. Oh no, he's just a preseason. He's just a preseason honoree. I could have sworn I saw a big Dallas D on that photo, but that just shows my
Oh
age.
yeah, you got thrown off by Roy
D.
and company, the Advocates. Tremendous 13 pictures from last night. Yeah, last night's event up there in Shreveport. The top 13 players from around the Shreveport coverage area.
Gosh darn, local journalism getting me again. With that being said, Florida has, while LSU continues to evaluate and figure out where they want to go with 2027 quarterbacks, which seems to favor legacy target Colton Nussmeier and also Pop Houston, who we talk about a ton on this show. They're in it with Elijah Haven. I just think that Florida is recruiting him way harder at this point. I think that they love the similarities and parallels to their current quarterback, DJ Lagway, out of Willis, Texas, who, by the way, it's his birthday today. So happy shout out to DJ
birthday,
and his
DJ.
family. We know that the Gators starting quarterback is obviously tuned into Louisiana versus all y'all. So we appreciate that for his support and his unbounding loyalty. But with that said, Elijah Haven is not on the clock. He is not someone who at any point has said, I'm committing during my junior season. In fact, I would be shocked if he committed before or during his football season. So I think they're going to take this into the spring, potentially even into official visits. But at the moment, I like where Florida's sitting with Elijah. I like where USC sits with Pop Houston. And I like where SMU, as we have just been brutally exposed to, sits with Malachi Ziegler.
I think you mentioned it when I was still reeling a little bit from the tremendous 13 announcement for Malachi. But for LSU fans, I wouldn't say that you're out of any of these situations. We'll watch as these recruitments for all these guys continue to develop. I know LSU fans, after some of the struggles they've had as a program the last couple of years, landing the top high school quarterbacks that they've been pursuing, that when you start seeing the predictions go in for, you have the prediction for Pop to go to USC, Elijah to Florida, and now Malachi, who, while LSU hadn't pulled the trigger with an offer, he's certainly been someone that's heavily on their board, and there's a lot of foundation of that relationship there for him to have that prediction in SMU. Some LSU fans will start to get nervous, and understandably so. I think LSU remains in play for all these guys, and then obviously, as much as we focused on the in-state guys, Louisiana fans, don't forget there's a guy, Colton Nussmeier, right there across the border, across the state line in Texas, who is in that mix with Pop and Elijah in terms of the top tier early targets for Joe Sloan in this 2027 class. And so just a moment to say, don't get too stressed out just yet. Still a long way to go. Still another quarterback that's not in Louisiana at the moment, but is certainly quite high on that purple and gold recruiting board. Any other thoughts?
And to piggyback off that, not only does LSU love Nussmeier, and they obviously are still very much in play with both Pop and Haven. I think the quarterback that Joe Sloan likes the most in this 27 class overall, in my opinion, might be Trey Taylor, who committed to Nebraska out of the state of Illinois. And then there's Teddy Gerard, who, yes, just committed to Notre Dame and is now probably the foundational piece of that class. But we're talking about these quarterback dominoes coming off the board early. That's just more time to get out the spatulas and make this thing interesting with a whole other year. In all seriousness, if you're going to commit early, you're going to have to play defense longer. I understand that in rev sharing, you can be paid to stay in the class. But this is still recruiting at the end of the day, and they have time to make up their minds.
We still will have plenty of conversations about all these guys on future episodes of Recruit That Boot. A long way to go for even the 26 class as we watch guys like Braden Allen and Blaine Bradford and company heading into their senior year, but certainly for this 2027 group headlined by that quarterback trio, amongst others, great pass catcher group in this 27 class around Louisiana. We'll be talking about all those guys for a year and a half and beyond when we're excited seeing what they do on Saturdays over at the next level. But until next time, and we'll see if we get a chance to talk next week. Again, we're on Spiegelman baby watch heavily right now, and so we'll be monitoring these recruiting processes. We'll be monitoring what's going on with Sam and Allison out there in Austin. And until next time, y'all be well. He's Sam Spiegelman. I'm Jared Roser. This is Louisiana versus all y'all's Recruit That Boob.
We might have to do an episode live from the delivery room. I'm told those things could take hours.